Today, we're going to talk about what it means to lose yourself, what causes it, and how to respond. If you're a coach, consultant, or well-being entrepreneur, grab free science-based content to grow your business by clicking the ebook link in the description below. When you feel like you're losing yourself, you might feel disconnected from your behaviors, confused by your reflections on reality, or like you don't understand your motivations. But losing yourself isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, sometimes people seek to lose their mind-based identity on purpose, which is sometimes also called ego death. And losing yourself can be a profoundly meaningful experience when you get glimpses of your true self. So let's talk about what it means to lose ourselves. What is losing yourself? Before we can get into what it means to lose yourself, we need to clarify what we mean by yourself. The self is a cryptic term that we often use to refer to multiple facets of our existence. For most of us, the term self is thought to be 1. Our bodily self, that is the center of our first-hand experience of the world, and 2. Our narrative self, that weaves together our history, experiences, interests, social roles, relationships, values, and aspirations. Each of these elements around which our identities are organized shapes our actions and perceptions. When we lose one of our pillars of self, we're left with a void in what we believe to be our identity. To learn more about what identity really is, check out our video on identity. But for now, let's talk about what it means to lose this sense of identity that most of us have. The sense that you are losing yourself is caused by anything that erodes, severs, or extinguishes any pillars of your mind-made identity. For example, someone might feel lost following retirement from a meaningful career. Changes in relationships can also induce a loss of self. For example, if part of your identity is being a spouse and you get divorced, you might feel like you don't know who you are or how to move through the world. Although these things are not our true self, they are how we see ourselves, and losing them can make us feel like we're losing ourselves. So what are some examples of losing yourself? Well, there are many situations in which we can feel to lose ourselves. Let's take a look at a few of these examples. 1. Losing yourself in a relationship. Being part of an intimate relationship is accompanied by the assumption of a social role, such as companion, partner, or spouse. Embedded in a social role are the standards, meanings, and expectations associated with it, which we identify with. When you lose yourself in a relationship, it's often because the role you're playing in the relationship is too distant from who you truly are. In other words, we lose ourselves when we allow someone else to determine who we are, even when we love that someone else very much. Losing yourself in a relationship isn't necessarily a reflection of an unhealthy relationship. In fact, this process is almost ubiquitous. Making sacrifices and compromises to accommodate your partner is theoretically an admirable act of love and commitment. But we have to be careful because we can easily lose ourselves if we don't know when to stop. Second, we can often lose ourselves during illnesses. Illness also has the potential to decimate our sense of self by limiting our ability to engage in activities by which we define ourselves, diminishing our autonomy over our lives and our future, and making us feel at odds with our bodies. Being incapacitated by illness and needing help can make us feel like a burden, which can challenge our previously held conception of ourselves as capable and independent, and it can dramatically change our roles in our social relationships. Third, it's also common to feel like we're losing ourselves after a loss. The loss of a loved one can have a profound impact on our identity. When we lose someone who was central to our lives, we lose a piece of our relational identity or a part of our identity that is organized around the relationships we have with others. The space that once held our identity as parent, child, sibling, or friend becomes vacant when we can no longer fill the role associated with that identity. The psychological pain or grief that accompanies loss can also significantly affect our self-concept. Grief can be debilitating, leading us to perform poorly or stop engaging entirely in activities that were once a central part of our personal narrative. It can also diminish our capacity to care for ourselves and leave us needing assistance, which again disrupts our sense of self. Additionally, grief can change our temperament and perspectives so dramatically that we feel unrecognizable to ourselves. So, are you losing yourself? Although it can feel hard, remember that losing parts of your identity is a normal and even healthy thing at times. We need to allow our identities to evolve with our ever-changing circumstances. And when we do, it helps us connect more strongly to our true self, the always present self that is not dependent on how we see and define ourselves. So, must we actually lose ourselves to find ourselves? We get so wrapped up in our identities, in our desire to be accepted by those around us, and to live up to our own standards, that we often lose touch with our true nature. The burden of the narrative we construct for ourselves and constantly seek to maintain can obscure what it is that actually moves us, fulfills us, and brings us to life. This is where we might benefit from losing ourselves, or at least the self that our mind has created. If we shed our narrative identity, we might be able to get back in touch with our authentic selves, and this is a blessing. Researchers and clinicians refer to shedding our narrative self as ego dissolution. Ego dissolution occurs when the brain networks that support self-referential processing are temporarily offline. When the narrative self is quiet, we are left with pure subjective experience, what might be considered our true, authentic self. Some ways that people commonly experience ego dissolution is through psychedelic drugs or meditation. In studies that explored the effect of psychedelics administered in a therapeutic context, participants often reported experiencing a loss of subjective self-identity, unity with the universe, loss of boundaries between self and the environment, and feeling unreal or detached from their mental processes. Importantly, research also shows that time spent in this egoless state is associated with a stronger sense of self, greater self-compassion, and reductions in depression and anxiety in the days and weeks after the experience of ego dissolution. As you can now see, losing yourself can be a difficult but transformative experience. Try to remember that your true self is ever present, and losing your mind-made identity, or ego dissolution, creates a window that allows you to get a glimpse of who you truly are. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and check out our free resources at berkeleywellbeing.com.